Hello everyone, I'm Jeff Stanley with Stanley Handcrafted, and today we're going to be talking about farmers markets. Now, we're heading into spring, which means they're all about ready to get started, so now is the time to start looking for them and start to plan them out and basically start to get everything that you're going to need going into those. So I kind of wanted to put together this video to talk about those and talk about some of the things that you're going to need going into it, what you should look for when you're signing up for them, what you're going to need when you sign up for them, and then what to bring and what to look out for when you're actually at the farmers market. Now, I've done a couple farmers markets and they're all pretty close to the same. There's definitely going to be some differences, but the same theme or what you're going to be looking for or what they require is going to be about the same across the board. So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you sign up early for these things. A lot of farmers markets will only allow a certain amount of vendors. So if you're selling candles, soaps, or anything like that, you definitely want to get in there and sign up first, because if they only allow for 2 or 3 candle vendors, you want to be in the top running for that one. So if you sign up early, you're going to be put at the top of the list for that. Having said that, that's not always the case for every farmer's market. Certain farmer's markets will go through, when you sign up for a farmer's market, you have to submit your website. Some of them, not all of them do that, but some of the bigger ones, you're going to have to submit your website. You're going to have to submit some photos for a jury. They'll go through and look at your product. So that's another good reason to have good product photos. You want everything to look professional so that when they're going through and looking at 5 or 6 different candle vendors, not really necessarily that yours stand out, but you definitely want to have everything presented professionally so that it looks like they're bringing in a professional vendor for their market. So if you've got stuff that just has no labels or anything like that, it doesn't look very good, or it's just a bunch of candles thrown across the table and it doesn't look like you took the time to present it well, you're probably not going to get selected. But if you have good photos, good website, and they can go through and look at it, you're pretty much a sure shot to get in there. Now, before we get into that, you're going to want to take a look around your area and find out what farmers markets are in your area and how close you are to certain ones. Now, small rural towns, this is going to be a little bit more difficult, because I know from the town I grew up in, which is a town of 13,000 people, there's only one farmers market, and the closest one is probably another 45 minutes away. So you definitely want to take that into consideration if you're going to be traveling back and forth to those. Now, that's not to say that a small farmer's market is a bad thing, because you can really capitalize on something like that, because the small town that I grew up in, a lot of people go to that one every single Saturday, so it definitely gets a lot of foot traffic for only 13,000 people. And I have definitely been into some bigger markets where the surrounding area is several 100,000 people and not many people went to it. So there's pros and cons to both of those. So once you find one that's close to you, every single market or farmer's market should have a list of what they require. Some of the biggest ones are going to need like a UBI number, business license, and sometimes a city selling license. And this is why you'll need to go through and look at the requirements, because there's one up in Seattle, where I'm from, that requires a UBI number and a Seattle seller's license, so you'll need both of those. There's a local one that I go to that doesn't require the city selling license. They only require the UBI number. So you'll definitely want to be prepared for that. So if you want to get in, like the one that's up in Seattle, I'm going to have to get a Seattle seller's license to be able to participate in that one. So once you find one, like the one local, right now it's coming up towards the end of March, beginning of April, and a lot of farmers markets will begin sometime in April around here. We do have a couple that run year round, so you can sign up for that one at any time. But the one local that I did last year, it starts April 20th. And they have early bird specials to where you can get in and kind of lock in your price for the booth or the spot you're going to be in the market at a lower rate. So you definitely want to pay attention to that. And again, like I said, you want to get in nice and early, because you want to be one of those 1, 2, or 3, or 4 slots that they have for your particular vendor. Now, some farmers markets don't care how many vendors they have, but a lot of them really try to limit it so that when you come to the market, you're not overpowered, and they also want to make it beneficial for you so that if you show up with candles, there's not 18 other vendors that are selling it and you just end up making no money because there's so much there to choose from. Okay, so once you get the farmer's market approval, you're going, what you're gonna need is, I'm gonna go ahead and throw it up here. So it's a real basic list. Most farmer's markets will require you to have a tent. It's usually a 10 by 10 tent. It's usually a canopy that's about 10 by 10, or the space is normally 10 by 10. You can get canopies that are smaller than that, 8 by 8, probably 6 by 6, but a 10 by 10 canopy is probably the best one. And you also want to make sure that you check out the colors of the canopies that you get. Some farmers markets will make all of the canopies the same color. So if you're gonna look for one, white is generally the best one to get, just because most vendors will either go white, or if they have no color preference, white is gonna be the most common. So you definitely wanna look at the requirements for the markets, because you wanna make sure that you get the right canopy for the market. Now, I've got a black one. I haven't run into any issues, but the nice thing about having the black one is I literally have the only black one out of a sea of canopies. So I think I'll try to find a picture of it, but the last market that I was at, there was maybe one purple one, probably about 100 white ones, and then my black one. So it really stood out. The next thing you want to have at the markets is, of course, tables, chairs. For the most part, you're going to want to stand for the whole thing. Just it's more inviting. A lot of booths, people will kind of sit back, and I don't know. Just to me, it just kind of looks lazy. And you'll see a lot of things online that talk about that kind of thing. You want to be inviting so that people will come into the booth or into the canopy. You're also going to want to get, along with the tables, some nice tablecloths are always a good idea. It just looks more presentable. So tables, tablecloths, and then risers for the table, just to bring the table up to kind of counter height so that people aren't bending over and having to lean over to see what you've got on the table. So they do sell them on Amazon. I'll try to put the link in the video description down below. It just pops it up a good foot so that when they walk up, everything is just at arm level. The other main thing that you're gonna wanna have is signage, proper signage. It took me way too long to figure this one out, but basically you want to have signs. And I don't mean your business name. You don't like Stanley Handcrafted. Stanley Handcrafted is a good thing to have on, like all the merchandise, the tent, the canopy, whatever you're gonna have. But even better is to put exactly what you sell: candles, soap, bath salts, whatever you have, you want that to be front and center. A lot of people, and I do the same thing, when I go to markets or anything like that, I don't really, everybody just walks by. They want to glance and they want to browse. They don't want to have to go into a booth sometimes to see what it is. So the less guesswork you can take out of that, and surprisingly enough, people won't recognize what a candle is, even walking up to it. I've had people walk up to the table, pick up the candle with the lid off of it, look at the wick in the middle of it, and run their fingers across and ask me if it's lotion. Now, I've only had one person do that, but I have had at least 40 or 50 people come up looking at the candles and ask, what do you sell? So it's definitely not obvious to a lot of people, and that right there is a perfect example of why you need to have big, huge lettering of exactly what you sell, so people can walk by. Maybe they'll walk through the market 4 or 5 times, and if they can look at your booth and see candles, $15, they know exactly what's in there without looking. Then if somebody likes candles, they'll walk in and they'll actually start to browse and take a look and pick everything up. So signage that can be clearly read from, I'd say, a good 3 or 4 booths away. You want people to see giant soap, candles, whatever you have. In this case, it's going to be candles, so that they can see it and walk directly towards it. As they get closer, you probably don't need the signage to say the price that big, but you definitely don't want people having to ask what the price is. You want them to be able to walk up, browse. A lot of people just want to be left alone, so it's a good idea to have that stuff so that they can walk up without having to get into big, long conversations with people, because I don't like that. I don't like to walk in there. I want to walk in, see what it is, get the price, and then walk out without feeling almost like a used car salesman. A lot of booths can definitely do that. That's why a lot of people will just keep on walking right by, because they don't want to get into a situation like that. You're also going to want to have cash on hand. A lot of people will tell you to get a cash box. I don't recommend a cash box. It is a good idea to have one, just to have it in case you're walking back and forth with it or something like that. But when I'm at the markets, I keep my cash on me, just because there are theft at these things. You also don't want to have, if you're helping a customer around the table, you don't want to have the cash box unless you have a couple people there. You want to make sure that you have the cash on you at all times. At least that's my recommendation. I would definitely keep the cash on you. You know exactly what's going on. You can get aprons that house that stuff a little bit better with zippers and everything like that, so that you can keep the bulk of the cash in one zipped pocket, and then keep the maybe like $20 or $30 so that you can make quick change for somebody that hands you a 20 or a 50 or something. And you definitely want to have enough cash on hand to basically break anything that they give you. Most people at markets aren't going to give you 100. I have had it happen once, and it was literally the first sale out of the gate. The guy came up, gave me 100, and I was out of everything within 20 minutes of starting. So I had to run to the bank with my son watching everything, run to the bank, get new cash, and then come back. So I don't typically go there with 100, maybe 50 or 60 cash is usually what I bring. That will cover most bases because people are usually paying with 10s, 20s, pretty small bills actually. You also want to make sure that you bring water. A lot of these things are going to be surrounded by food, but it's not, I've done a lot of these markets where I'm there by myself, so I really can't leave the booth. You do end up knowing the people that are right next to you, they will watch the booth, but it's still a little nerve-wracking leaving your booth unattended, so I like to bring everything I need right at the booth. So water, something to eat, chairs, umbrellas, if you're going to be back, if it's in the sun, if your canopy doesn't cover you completely, it's always a good idea to have extra stuff like that to protect yourself. And then of course your product. You definitely want to make sure that you have enough product on hand. You always want to make sure that your booth looks like it has a ton of stuff in it. Not cluttered or anything like that. I don't mean that, but you don't want to walk by a booth and see like 30 candles on there, like one little small table and candles, because it looks like you don't have anything and people are just going to walk right by. If you have a booth that, and I've seen them before, if you have a booth that is just completely cluttered and it looks like chaos inside there, you're also going to get people who are just going to walk right by because it just seems like there's so much stuff in there that they don't want to go in. So I usually have two tables, they're two 8-foot tables, and I have a rack that holds all the candles along one side and then candles along the other side. Now I will be putting together a video on how to make the racks that I have. It's a real easy way to do it. You can get all this stuff at Home Depot. It holds them really well, and it's a cheap rack to make. If you don't have that, Michael's is another good spot. Home Depot, pretty much anywhere that has, depending on the style that you want to go for. A lot of farmers markets, people go more towards rustic, almost like the wood behind me. They go towards stuff like that. And you can get a lot of those things at Michael's, and they're 50% off coupons. You can get them at a good deal. And you can basically get a bunch of those, stack them, and then just use them as shelves to display your candles. And it's always a good idea to have a wide variety of scents. You don't want to show up, and I've done this before too, where I showed up at a market with maybe about 8 different scents. I like to show up with a minimum 10 to 12, usually a lot more than that. I like to have about 20 different scents on hand. That way you're more likely to hit everybody's palate, because if you have 6 or 8 scents on there, and you've got a couple like baking type scents, a couple florals, and then maybe a couple spring or something like that, you're not really going to hit everybody's palate, and you will definitely notice declining sales. The times I've done the best at markets is when I've had at least 20 to 30 different types of scents. That way, no matter who comes through, they're going to find a scent that they like. And then once you get down into the scents that you bring, it's always a good idea to have multiples of each scent. So if, and obviously that's not going to happen just depending on production cycles. I've shown up with some very popular scents and I only had 3 left because I just didn't have time to make some. But I usually try to show up, I usually pour them 6 at a time, so I usually try to show up with no less than 6, but I try to make a full box every single time. And I've got a couple boxes sitting right here, which holds 12 in a box. So I usually try to get 1 scent, 1 whole box, so 12 of each. And another good idea to keep in mind when you go to markets is people like a deal. A lot of people will come through and buy a single candle, but if you offer a deal, like for mine, and this is all personal preference, and you'll learn this as you go on at the different markets, but I sell a lot more candles when I offer a buy 4 for the price of 3 or a discounted price. So I have one candle that sells for $12 and I do 4 for $40. So you get a discount if you're buying 4 of them, and a lot of people will take that offer. And I didn't mention it in the beginning of the video, but one thing you want to pay attention to is the price of the markets, and then what kind of percentage that you're going to have to hand over. A lot of markets are pretty low. The one that I did last year is a $40, or excuse me, it's not a $40 market fee. I think it was $25 or $30 to do the market daily, and then you had to hand over, I believe it was 5 or 6%. So whatever you made throughout the day, you give them back. It was the $25 fee for the market and then 5% of your sales, which isn't too bad, but it's definitely something that you want to consider because some markets will be a lot higher than that. Another thing that you want to pay attention to, and you won't really know this one until you start doing a couple markets, is when you notice something's not selling, go ahead and move it from the table so that you can add more product that is selling. I did a lot of markets where I kept bath salts on the table for probably a good week or 2 longer than I should have. Bath salts around here or at the market I was at just didn't sell. I think in the probably 7 or 8 markets before I removed them from the table, I sold maybe 2 of them. And that's pretty much valuable real estate where I could have had another probably 10 or 12 candles on the table that just would have done much better. So I think that's pretty much it. I know I've probably glossed over a couple things. Obviously, there's 100 different things you can bring to a market. These are just some of the quick ones that I like to tell people when they're first starting markets. Some of the things I'm still learning to bring, so I may add to this list. I hope I've got everything listed right here. I'm gonna go ahead and put all this stuff up. If I think of something after I get done recording this, I'm gonna go ahead and list it here. So if I didn't say it and it pops up, that's why. But I think that should cover everything that you need to be aware of when you're going into your first market. And again, if I did gloss over anything, or if you have an idea or something that I missed in this that you bring to your markets, please let me know in the comments down below, and I'll try to add that into everything. I'm gonna try to put all these in the video description down below as well, so that people can copy it and kind of print it out so they have a checklist going into a market. As always, if you want to get in touch with me, I've got all the links down below in the video description, the email, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, the DIY Facebook group where you can go into and discuss a lot of this stuff further with people who are doing markets. And I hope this was informative, and give the video a like if you liked it, and thank you for watching.